City Council meeting. City Clerk, can I get a roll call?
Thank you,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Daniel Damian,
Here.
Councilmember Monica Garcia,
Here.
Councilmember Paul Hernandez, Councilmember Paul Hernandez,
Well, I'll make a motion to excuse Councilmember Hernandez, and I believe also Councilmember Avila might be running late. Can I get a second?
Second.
Any objections? No. City Clerk, continue.
thank you. Mayor Emanuel Estrada.
Here, thank you for that. And I believe at this point, we will open up public communications. If there's anybody looking to speak, now is the time. Seeing that nobody is looking to speak, I will now close public communications, and I believe we will move on to a presentation by our city planner, Ron Garcia.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. Good afternoon, council, staff. We're really excited to present to you tonight a presentation, as noted at my last ADU study session discussion with the council on expanding accessory dwelling unit production in Baldwin Park for affordable purposes, and also incentives for allowing ADUs, incentivizing ADUs for people who are experiencing homelessness. Eurico and I have been working on the planning activities and efforts under the Measure H homeless grant funds that we were able to attain. And so now I want to introduce to you Craig Edelman and Farzad Mashoud of Lasar Development, who are going to be providing that presentation on listing policies that the City Council can implement with regards to incentivizing ADUs for affordable purposes, and also for those who are experiencing homelessness. So I'll now hand it over to Lasar Development. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be with you this evening presenting, unfortunately virtually. We're excited. This is one of many strategies that Lasar Development Consultants is working on with the city of Baldwin Park and the Mid-Valley cohort that is working on a regional approach to addressing homelessness and housing affordability. I wanted to thank city staff, Eurico and Ron in particular, for the terrific partnership to date over the last number of months in working on the ADU and other strategies that we're going to start to present tonight. We are looking forward to being back before you again soon on a number of other approaches that we've been working on with staff and with the broader cohort, including hotel and motel conversions and inclusionary housing. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my associate Farzad Mashoud, who has done the lion's share of the work and the heavy lifting on this to present our findings for you this evening. And we will be open for questions and comments after that. So for Farzad, with that, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Greg. And thank you, Mayor Estrada, Council Members Garcia and Damian for having us here. And for Ron and Eurico for your partnership throughout this. As Craig said, we're gonna be presenting tonight about accessory dwelling units and how this housing strategy can help you meet your affordable housing needs. We've studied a variety of accessory dwelling unit programs, looking especially for those that target homelessness, as well as others that more broadly address affordable housing needs. So on the next slide, I just wanted to talk here about the context of this work. This study, this accessory dwelling unit study, was conducted in the context of implementing your city's new accessory dwelling unit ordinance, as well as your 2018 homelessness plan. This work has been funded by Measure H, as Ron mentioned, and the report includes information for all of the 3 cities in the cohort. And you'll see more details in the report about El Monte and South El Monte. But of course, tonight I'll be focusing on Baldwin Park specifically. And really the aim of our report was to identify practical steps that the city can take and That's what we'll be focusing on tonight. So on the next slide, I want to mention that our position is that homelessness is fundamentally a housing problem. So a vital piece of solving that is to build new housing. Creating new housing that's deeply affordable for people experiencing homelessness takes significant subsidy. And in the report, we outline the limited programs that are doing that, as well as the Back Home Initiative, which is a local effort. I'll share a little bit more about that, that seeks to build specifically ADUs for people experiencing homelessness. But more broadly, in preventing homelessness, there's also strategies around accessory dwelling units. And that is to increase the supply of homes that are relatively affordable, taking pressure off of your city's lower cost housing. But that doesn't necessarily require subsidy. Rather takes advantage of the demand and recent changes to state law that allow accessory dwelling units to be built more. Next slide, we included the language from your 2018 homelessness plan. And these are our underlines and boldings just to highlight a few key takeaways the city had highlighted in its planning, earlier planning. One is to target incentives for ADUs for people who experiencing homelessness. Second is to maximize the potential of your ADUs. So we think that this can especially be done by providing more homes that cost relatively less to build. And then finally, educating homeowners. Part of our contract is to work with the city and work with Ron and Yuriko to provide an educational webinar. So once the incentives become more solid and defined that the city wants to promote, we'll be holding a webinar to encourage homeowners to build ADUs. Next slide, just a quick overview of what the report touches on. I won't be going into detail on all these points, but I encourage you all to look through the report for more information about each of these points listed here. Statewide growth, state legislation, local conditions and demand, and the other points listed. This really builds off of Ron's most recent report to you, the council, about the updates to the ordinance. And tonight we're going to focus mostly on our recommendations, and particularly the lowest hanging fruit for the city. Next slide. Why accessory dwelling units are such a popular housing solution. There are various reasons. I'm just going to highlight three that are on this slide. First is that accessory dwelling units are what sometimes is called gentle density, increases the density of housing in single family zoned areas modestly. ADUs tend to have a lower per unit cost than your conventional affordable housing development. This is mainly because ADUs use wood frame construction, which costs less than a typical 5-story, 6-story building. They're also built on land that a homeowner already owns and generally don't require additional infrastructure. Finally, ADUs are popular because they benefit homeowners and renters. Homeowners get to see the benefits of added equity, possibly additional income, and renters have more places to choose from to rent, typically in areas that are desirable and typically at rents that are affordable. ADUs, even without income restrictions, there's a study recently that showed this statewide. ADUs tend to rent around the local market rate or less. It's very rare that ADUs rent for above the local market rate. Next slide, just to define what we mean by ADUs. They're sometimes known by these colloquial names: backyard cottage, mother-in-law unit. But ADU, accessory dwelling unit, it's kind of a clinical name, is kind of the official proper name. They're a second house on typically a single family lot. They can be attached or detached. In California, a house can have both an ADU and what we call a junior ADU. And a junior ADU is a carve out of an existing home. So you can have both on a single family lot. And as Ron discussed a couple of weeks ago, Baldwin Park's ADU ordinance also allows ADUs on multifamily lots. And while ADUs are increasingly popular, they're not new. I always like to include this picture of Fonzie from Happy Days. You may know that Fonzie lived in an ADU behind the Cunningham's house. This sort of housing typology was common in pre-World War II homes and pre-World War II neighborhoods, including where the Cunningham lived. But with post-war suburbanization, especially in cities like Baldwin Park, there were a lot more zoning restrictions that did not allow ADUs. And so this is why there are many unpermitted ADUs in many communities. The next slide shows that ADU growth is outpacing all other forms of housing in California. That the topmost line, the light blue line, shows you the percentage change in ADUs permitted per year statewide. And as you can see, ADUs are far outpacing any other form of housing. And then on the next slide, we have similar numbers for Baldwin Park in the thicker dark blue, and then your neighboring cities of El Monte and South El Monte. So you see there's a big spike from 2019 to 2020 in ADU permit applications, and all signs are indicating that spike will continue. Next slide is a map showing every single family property in Baldwin Park that has potential for a 600 square foot ADU. That's about 8,800 lots. That's almost every single family lot in your city. There's about 10,000 single family lots in your city. And the point here is that there's tremendous potential for ADUs. It's not realistic to expect every single house to develop with an ADU. But just to put it in perspective, if 1 out of every 4 houses adds an ADU, the city will meet its entire RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Allocation, which is part of your housing element. If you add 1 ADU on every 10th house, you'll get about halfway to your RHNA. Again, even those proportions are probably not realistic, but just to give you a sense of how significant of a chunk of your housing needs ADUs can meet. You can also think about what parts of the city you particularly want to promote ADUs and target incentives in that way. So for example, if you really want to see more ADUs near transit, you can promote incentives in those areas. And about 40% of your single family homes are within a half mile of transit. Next slide. As a city, you've done a great job keeping up with state law, keep updating your ADU ordinance, and easing restrictions on ADUs to see this growth in their permitting and in their production. And so there's a big step between that connects seeing more ADUs and your decisions and hard work have been really important for that. But there's still a gap to go beyond addressing zoning to addressing financing of ADUs. And so that's what the purpose of this work is now, in part, is to review possible incentives and programs to address the financing need of ADUs. And this is a vital. So let's talk about what our report found. First, on the next slide, first we found different types of incentive programs, different types of incentives. So there's a wide range from financial subsidies, there on the left of the slide, things like fee waivers, low-cost loans, grants. We also identified funding streams that can be used for your financial subsidies that don't necessarily need to come from general funds. And then there's other incentives that cities are offering. Streamlining ADU permit applications, offering either a larger ADU or an additional ADU, which we're kind of calling density bonus. Assisting homeowners with the process of building an ADU. Homeowners are not developers. It's not easy for a typical homeowner to get a new house built on their lot. So often that's a barrier. And then finally, providing amnesty for unpermitted ADUs is a vital strategy to ensuring that existing units are safe and also to count those units towards your RHNA. So on the next slide, there's different types of incentives, but then incentives can target different groups. Widely across the state, the people who tend to be building ADUs tend to be households that are higher income. So it's important to have programs that target low and moderate income homeowners to help them also benefit from it having ADUs. That's one type of population that incentives target. There are also programs that target low income renters, telling a homeowner, hey, if you're building an ADU, why don't you rent it to a low-income tenant and we'll help you with the cost, or we'll guarantee rent. There's a very small number of programs that we found that target people experiencing homelessness. This is really a nascent space. There's a lot of potential here. But there's a variety of reasons that ADUs can be difficult to use directly for homelessness, particularly because of the deep subsidy needed, as well as the possible service needs. Again, I just want to mention the Back Home Initiative. This is a really promising program in the works locally. That is a great example of bringing down the cost of ADUs, providing that deep subsidy, and using them for people in the homelessness system. But really, this type of ADU incentive we're early in the curve on. And then finally, there are types of ADU incentives that apply universally. Any homeowner who wants to build an ADU can benefit from them. Next slide are recommendations. So I'll spend a little more time on each of these, but just briefly, we have 5 recommendations in the report about updating the city website, about simplifying your construction process, about providing resources for low-income renters, about matching tenants who could benefit from an ADU, and then finally about unpermitted ADUs. So I'll go into these in more detail on the next slide. Specifically for updating the city website, we had a few recommendations. This is what we think a great example of a low-hanging fruit, including some language on your website about the benefits of developing an ADU to encourage homeowners, including the latest ordinance, development standards, application, some of which is already there, but creating a separate page for ADUs. And then other helpful information, including resources from an organization we particularly recommend, the Casita Coalition. Then if the Mid-Valley Collaborative cohort does build an ADU, build a website, we think Baldwin Park can include its ADU information on that site. And then finally, HCD, the state's Department of Housing, is working on an application, a template application for ADUs. When that comes down, that could be something to simplify the process and improve clarity and accessibility. The next slide, just broadly, ways to simplify construction and reduce costs can be through updating your own internal processes, your ordinance. Again, a lot of great work has been done to update the ordinance, but there can still be efforts to fine tune. For example, looking at development standards, looking at your internal permitting process, even at what point in the development process you collect fees could really help people to develop ADUs by, for example, collecting fees at the end of the process rather than at the beginning, and other actions. Next slide, providing resources for low-income tenants. There's a few different types of resources. So as I mentioned, the benefits of ADUs have largely gone to higher income households with the means to build a new unit. And so there are now more opportunities for lower income homeowners to take advantage of building an ADU and think about how those benefits can also go to low income renters. So again, actions in this area, these are a little more complex, but they would really connect your excellent work in updating the zoning ordinance with your desired outcome of having ADUs benefit your lower income residents, those at risk of homelessness. So this can include development resources like designs, a financial subsidy like a grant, encouraging junior ADUs, which cost a lot less to build because they're using an existing portion of the home, and then also working with the Back Home Initiative to get some low-cost ADUs built in your city and to use those for people experiencing homelessness. Next slide, tenant matching programs. There's 2 populations we think are really good for matching to an ADU. One are low-income seniors, often fit very well with an ADU, and then Section 8 voucher holders. Many times households with a Section 8 voucher can't find a landlord who's willing to rent to them. So connecting these voucher holders with an ADU owner who's willing to rent to someone can really simplify the process of finding a unit and also guarantee the homeowner a steady income source. And then finally, the last slide here on these recommendations are unpermitted units. We understand Baldwin Park has a number of unpermitted ADUs, and so we would recommend evaluating the total number. We know Ron has begun this process. Taking a closer look at those will help you know what's out there. And then creating some sort of amnesty program that ensures permits for life safety requirements on ADUs. It helps the homeowner to build wealth by having a formal ADU, and then also those units will count towards your RENA. They will count as newly permitted units that meet your housing needs. And then the next slide, this is sort of a late breaking news on the ADU front. This was not included in our report because it came out just a week or so ago. Cal HFA, the State Housing Finance Agency, has created a $25,000 ADU grant for pre-development, things like architectural designs, permits, and so on. And this is given in conjunction with a Cal HFA approved lender who can loan money for the construction of an ADU. This is primarily meant to target low and moderate income homeowners. The qualifications are noted in those bullets. 80% of AMI, or if you're in a qualified census tract, which is the purple pink area on this map, is up to 158,000. And that same limit applies if your combined loan to value ratio for your construction loan is above 80%. So this program's in the works. It's expected to be finalized by September. So this is definitely a resource we want to point Baldwin Park's residents to as on your website and in our educational webinar. So last slide to conclude, I want to emphasize that ADUs have a huge potential for Baldwin Park, and creating incentives to promote their use, especially as affordable housing, but even at market rate, can help the city achieve two key outcomes. First, ADUs can help keep your residents in place. You're not only providing additional rental units, but you're helping homeowners add value to their home, often low to moderate income homeowners if you target your incentives there. Secondly, ADUs can meet a big share of your city's RENA. Your RENA is about 2,000. And so as I mentioned earlier, if just 1 out of every 10 single family houses adds an ADU, you'll meet almost half your RENA. So that's our presentation. Thank you all so much for your time. The last slide is just a thank you. And I believe we have a few minutes for questions.
Is there any council members that have any questions? No. I guess I have one question, and then I guess maybe you can answer it, but one of my concerns with ADUs is that, and then you kind of mentioned it yourself, is that it helps with the RENA numbers, right? And so my concern is that if we focus on ADUs and we increase our RENA numbers through the ADUs, then, you know, that becomes kind of a potential to say, well, we've met our RENA numbers through ADU, and then we take away the focus and we kind of remove ourselves from building new affordable units, you know, because I think there's a limit to how big an ADU can be, you know, and somebody might need there might be families that need something bigger than, 600 or 700 square feet. Yeah. But then, because we've already met our RENA number, there's really no incentive for a council to keep pushing that boundary on building new units.
That's a great point, Mayor Estrada. And I want to just, my point about meeting your RENA, I want to caution, even 1 out of 10 is probably more than what's realistic. 1 out of every 10 single family homes adding an ADU is probably much more than what's realistic. But my point is it meets a significant portion. But your comment also points to an important area to target your incentives, which is for family size units. So right now, most cities, including Baldwin Park, the maximum ADU is 1,200 square feet. But a city can make that higher. And so maybe you want to have a higher limit, and maybe you want to attach some sort of condition to that higher limit, which is that you can build a larger ADU if you keep it affordable. And that way your ADUs meet your need for family size units that are affordable.
Great, thank you. I've always wanted to ask somebody that question, right? Because it always kind of lingers in my mind. I believe our CEO has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. First, a question about you stated a fact that the majority of the ADUs constructed so far generally have been by higher income households. There's something counterintuitive about that, and that you would think lower income would have better use or a higher need for additional housing space in their homes. How do you explain that? Is it an affordability question? The construction of being able to construct the ADU, is that what it is?
It's about access to financing. And Craig, please feel free to add to this. We included in a report a graph that shows you the difficulty of getting different types of financing. And it's very difficult to get a construction loan for an ADU and to use equity of your house for an ADU if you are lower income and if you don't have a ton of equity in your house. This is why higher income households tend to have much more equity in their house and cash savings, which are often used for building ADUs.
Yeah, I'll quickly add, in essence, and Farzad referenced this in his presentation, that what we do with ADUs is turn homeowners into developers. And historically, one of the challenges with development is access to capital and expertise and having the bandwidth, if you will, to be able to take on a project like that. And so higher income homeowners can outsource that and pay somebody to do that more easily for themselves as well. And so essentially what the land use policy does is open up development potential among single family homeowners. And again, for those reasons, those that have the most access to that development opportunity tend to be people with resources. And so these recommendations, in part, again, the bridging that Farzad referenced, is trying to connect people that actually will benefit most significantly from a policy perspective. We want to increase income and economic opportunity for low and moderate income homeowners to create that access.
Mayor.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, it's actually Councilmember Garcia.
No, I think Mayor Pro Tem had asked me before you, and then you can go.
Thank you.
Got it.
Sorry, thank you. So, quick question. So when they built the ADUs, it's not necessarily affordable housing. How do we determine what the rent will be, and how is it? How do we limit them from increasing the rent and not making it affordable for our residents? I know you said they can opt into a program where we can put them into the Section 8 where they can help subsidize for the rent, but how do we make sure that these ADUs become affordable for our community?
Well, I can jump in and say that's, again, part of the bridging policy. Land use on its own essentially is intended to address housing supply without an affordability component to it. And so you're completely correct, Mayor Pro Tem, that in the absence of some other incentives or program that are specifically focused, like Farzad presented, on other outcomes, we don't have an affordability component built in. More broadly, we do equate greater housing supply with helping to address housing affordability, but that's a much longer term proposition at a larger scale. So more specifically, I think, and Farzad, feel free to jump in, but in the presentation and the findings, the idea is to tie these potential programs like a subsidy, like an incentive program, with affordability in return. So we are not providing grants or subsidies just to build the housing. We are proposing to tie those with affordability restrictions, which is the typical strategy in affordable housing more broadly, that we tie subsidy or other policies that incentivize affordable housing, giving public good in return for affordability and commitments to those types of restrictions over time.
So there's really no type of rent control for these ADUs, because at this time, for example, in Baldwin Park, we have rent control for apartments, but not for single family homes. So these ADUs can possibly become very expensive as well. So that's one of my concerns with that. I mean, we would increase the housing availability in Baldwin Park, but not necessarily the affordability part of it. Thank you.
Councilmember Garcia.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first I have some comments and then I guess I'll get into the incentives piece. But I do want to say that I've been involved first as a planning commissioner beginning in 2001 and then as a council member beginning in 2007. And most conversations that I've had with community members regarding housing or density have usually been around maintaining and preserving single family neighborhoods and then encouraging density along corridors, major corridors. And so now here we are presented with this ADU law. And just a little bit of background when I was first appointed to the Planning Commission in 2001, the city of Baldwin Park actually did allow for granny flats and a lot of subdivisions. If you go around our city, you'll see that a lot of our single family lots have already been densified. That's kind of contributed to some of the community members that come to council and complain about the parking issues in certain neighborhoods and things like that. So, we did put a kind of a cap, I guess, made it more restrictive for being able to apply for permits for granny flats. And to your point, or the point that was made earlier, I think that's where we did come up with, a lot of illegal conversions of garages or whatever illegal units, that came to be during that time frame. So now we are here looking at this ADU law and wanting to comply, of course, with state law, knowing that it's going to change the feel of our neighborhoods. But my question is, how do we incentivize the property owners who have converted their garages or whatever it might be illegally? How do we encourage them? How do we incentivize them to now pull the permits so that their illegal units can become legal and city approved, and then we can use those units towards our RENA numbers?
Yeah, this is a tough nut to crack. The city of Los Angeles passed an unpermitted dwelling units ordinance a couple of years ago. It's a very good ordinance, I think. It addresses all the needs, but it has, I think, never or very rarely been used by homeowners who want to convert. So this is a challenge cities are trying to figure out. What we're finding is the important thing is to help with that cost and help with the process. These can be some of your lowest cost units because you essentially get another unit in your city, a permitted unit, for simply the cost of complying with building codes, which could be a lot less than building an ADU from scratch and a lot less than building a conventional subsidized affordable housing unit. So it's addressing the costs. Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, and I would add, as with many amnesty programs, as far as I'd framed it, coming within the legal fold can have benefits. Both you don't have the cloud of an illegal unit hanging over your property and your household, but also when it comes to real estate, there should be a value add realized there in terms of the value of the property upon sale, in particular disclosures required or not in the case of a legal unit versus an illegal unit. So there is a built-in incentive within that process. And to Farzad's point, we haven't seen, at least in the city of Los Angeles, that has necessarily been enough to get over the hump, but I think it gets part of the way there. And so the idea would be to combine that with other strategies to collectively be enough for homeowners to choose that option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, we want to have a conversation with our staff about the property taxes and how they are, triggered with any improvements, right?
Mm.
And that's probably working against us. But I think if we're looking at incentivizing ADUs in any way, that a big portion of that plan should address the illegal units that already exist, that we would benefit from legalizing, I guess, and permitting. And so that should be a great focus of any incentives that we provide.
And I'm glad you brought up property taxes, Councilmember Garcia. Ron actually mentioned this to me the other day, and I did check with LA County assessor. So all that would be reassessed is the new portion. So if you add, for example, an ADU that's worth $100,000, your annual property taxes would go up by about $1,000. It's not your whole property that is reassessed.
What about a garage that was converted? Because that's more realistic in our community, I would think. I think that right
so
now
the value of the new value would be assessed. So whatever is added by just the garage, not the existing house.
Right. So let's say there was a garage that was improved, and it's what is a garage? Like, it's maybe usually a 2-car garage is
500 square feet.
About 500 square feet. Okay. So about 10% of that, so about $500 is what they're looking at as an increase every year.
I would say it's not our expertise. I'm hesitant to kind of respond in detail, Councilwoman Garcia, but we'd be happy to kind of look into the calculation on that, especially for an attached ADU, which is the point that you're making, and the process by which the assessor would value that.
Okay. Yeah, because I think my question is square footage versus the actual, I guess, cost or value of that ADU. So
understood. Because in an attached unit, you're actually not changing the square footage per se, and so that's why I'd like to take a closer look at what the assessor approach is for how they change the valuation.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. And I know our staff was looking into that as well. So maybe at the next time that we have this discussion, we can think through that, because, like I said, any incentives for ADUs in our community it's only to our benefit as a city that we focus on those that are already have been converted but would be considered illegal. And then, some of these other policies, I think, would only be I think they should be secondary in a community like ours. Those are my comments, but thank you.
Great, thank you, and thank you for being here. So, and then definitely if you can send us over or email our city clerk that information, especially the one that you mentioned about the loans, and then in case anybody is interested, in case any of the residents are interested in doing that, then we can share that with them as well. But definitely, thank you guys for being here with us today. To the consulting team, of course, to Ron, our city planner, and we'll definitely stay in touch and keep working on this topic.
Thank you
very much. Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Great. So at this moment, I believe that is all in our open session, and we are now ready to recess to closed session.
So we're going to take this out of order. So the Ruelas case will come up number one. So Mr. Leal and Ms. Medina, if you could stay you'll be first on the closed session. Thank you.
Right?
Always good. How do I get my email working? Well, no, there's a story there.
Yeah.
Okay, I will make you host and then I'll let myself out.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Take care.
All right, you too. I'll see you at 7.
Okay.
They're still logging in. They're going to log in. Mark, Mark.
I don't think Mark's here.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Damien. Are you the host?
Yes.
Is Councilmember Garcia with you as well?
I just did.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
perfect. Do you know if Councilmember Hernandez is joining?
He said around 6:10.
Okay, thank you. So we're okay, Mayor. Wait, Mayor. So we have Councilmember Garcia and Councilmember Damien on Zoom. So we can start. Yeah, Councilmember Hernandez is joining us later.
All right, well, we're ready to go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've taken out of order the case Ruelas v. City of Baldwin Park, and Francisco Leal and Maribel Maradina are here to give you an update on that case. So if you can take it from here, thank you.